The Beach Boys combined rock and pop, and oftentimes jazz and classical music, to create a unique sound that defined a generation of surf music. Founded in 1961, the band consisted of brothers Brian, Carl, and Dennis Wilson, their cousin Mike Love, and close friend Al Jardine. They are best known for their vocal harmonies, embrace of youth culture, and experimental sounds, all of which came together to create their California sound. Today, we're giving you 10 very interesting facts about this iconic surf band, the Beach Boys. They were sued for their most iconic hit, Surfin USA, released in 1963. Turns out the song that made the band so popular is very similar to Chuck Berry's 1958 track, Sweet Little 16. Listen, and you'll be shocked by the similarities. Brian Wilson merely changed the lyrics from Berry's version of listing out American cities to referencing surfing and California terms. While Wilson claimed he was heavily inspired by Berry's song, Berry and his lawyers threatened to sue for plagiarism. Wilson explains his inspiration behind the song, saying, "I was going with a girl called Judy Bowles, and her brother Jimmy was a surfer. He knew all the surfing spots. I started humming the melody to Sweet Little 16, and I got fascinated with the fact of doing it. And I thought to myself, God, what about trying to put surf lyrics to Sweet Little 16's melody? The concept was about they are doing this in this city, and then they're doing that in that city. So I said to Jimmy, hey Jimmy, I want to do a song mentioning all the surf spots. So he gave me a list. However, Murray Wilson, the Beach Boys manager and also Wilson's father, agreed to give the publishing rights to Berry's publisher, Arc Music. Berry's name eventually appeared in the songwriting credits of the song in 1966. Bruce Johnston, who joined the Beach Boys in 1965, took a trip to London to promote the band's album Pet Sounds, and it almost broke up The Who. Johnston traveled to London by himself to promote the album, because Capitol Records wasn't doing so to his standards. When Johnston arrived, he struck a friendship with Keith Moon, drummer of The Who, and fan of the Beach Boys. Moon acted as Johnston's tour guide, taking him around the city to clubs, restaurants, and introducing him to friends. One night, the two went to a party with John Entwistle, The Who's bass guitarist, and ended up staying there a bit too long, missing the beginning of a gig The Who was having the same night. When they arrived, they saw that the band members Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey had started without them. Moon was infuriated and provoked a drunken fight. Johnston recalls seeing this fight, saying, "They got in the biggest fight I've ever seen. Guitars are swinging. Everybody's in a frenzy. Guys were bleeding." The fight ended in Moon and Entwistle quitting the band, which only lasted a short amount of time. The Beatles and the Beach Boys heavily inspired one another. Throughout the 60s, the two bands released albums around similar times, leaving room for inevitable comparisons. A chain of inspiration happened between the albums Rubber Soul, Pet Sounds, and Sgt Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. When Brian Wilson heard the Beatles' Rubber Soul, he knew immediately it was the future of rock music and that he had to get to work on the Beach Boys' next album. He explains how it inspired Pet Sounds, saying, "Listening to Rubber Soul didn't clarify my ideas for Pet Sounds. Exactly. But it inspired me. When we were listening to it that night, I said to myself, now I'm going to make an album just as good as Rubber Soul. Not the same album. Obviously, there can only be one album that's Rubber Soul, just like there can only be one Pet Sounds. But it inspired me to do my own thing. And so the next morning, I went to the piano and wrote God Only Knows with Tony Asher. Pet Sounds went on to be the Beach Boys' most successful album and boomeranged inspiration back to the Beatles. George Martin, the Beatles producer, says the following about how Pet Sounds influenced Sgt Pepper's. "Without Pet Sounds, Sgt Pepper would have never happened. Pepper was an attempt to equal Pet Sounds. And of course, Sgt Pepper became the Beatles' most successful album. This friendly competition between the Beatles and the Beach Boys is truly to thank for their iconic music both bands produced in the 60s. Although they were known for their surf-themed tunes, Dennis was the only Beach Boy who surfed. Dennis was a huge fan of the sport and encouraged the band to lean into it, writing songs that celebrated it and the relaxed lifestyle that came along with it. The tragic irony is that Dennis, the avid surfer, drowned to his death. In 1983, Dennis's body was found in the Marina del Rey harbor after he had spent a night of drinking on a yacht with 2 women. But not only did most of the band members not surf, Brian had a fear of water. He also couldn't even swim due to the risk of permanent hearing loss. But while on stage, the band sported the surfer uniform of tight white jeans, striped shirts, and sneakers, which they would take off right after shows. Although they did not surf, surfing was used as inspiration and a metaphor for the freedom and youth they wished to capture in their music. Manager Murray Wilson would fine the members of the Beach Boys if they didn't keep up with their clean image. Different acts were entitled to different fines. For example, if the boys were caught cursing, they would be fined $100. If they were caught hanging out with a girl, they would be fined $50. Along with using bad language and flirting with girls, the band members were also not allowed to drink alcohol. The fine would also increase if the boys went on tour. For one of their tours in 1964, the fine was raised from $100 to $1,000, money that would be taken right out of the tour's proceeds. This type of behavior and dynamic is one of the reasons why the band had a falling out with Murray Wilson. Dennis Wilson and Mike Love, who were cousins, hated each other to the point that they couldn't be in the same room. The primary reason for this feud was that Wilson was having an affair with Love's wife, which led to them getting a divorce. Problems continued to arise when Wilson slept with Love's illegitimate child, Sean. Although Love claimed Sean was not his daughter, it is widely known that she was. Wilson and Sean got married and had a son together a year before his death. While this messy feud was occurring, tensions between other band members were also arising, leaving no one to tame the hatred between Wilson and Love. They eventually had to instate a restraining order from the physically attacking each other. The Beach Boys' 1967 album, Smiley Smile, had been used to soothe patients in drug rehab. While the album wasn't exactly a commercial success upon release, it became increasingly popular later in the band's career. Most interestingly, it is said to have positive effects on an acid come-down. One drug clinic used it to aid patients who were experiencing bad trips on LSD and claimed it also calmed people's anxiety during drug withdrawals. Carl Wilson explains this phenomenon in a 1970 interview. In Fort Worth, Texas, there's a drug clinic which takes people off the streets and helps them get over bad LSD trips. They don't use any traditional medical treatment whatsoever. All they do is play the patient our Smiley Smile album, and apparently this acts as a soothing remedy which relaxes them and helps them to recover completely from their trip. Even today, people have cited listening to the album during a trip and have testified to it making it more relaxing. I should have tried that. God Only Knows, perhaps one of the Beach Boys' most famous songs, was written in under 1 hour. Known for its beautiful lyrics and instrumentals, God Only Knows is a fan favorite and critically acclaimed masterpiece. However, Brian Wilson and Tony Asher, a songwriter who co-wrote 8 songs on the Beach Boys' album Pet Sounds, said it took them a mere 45 minutes to compose the song. Asher says, "We didn't spend a lot of time writing it. It came pretty quickly, and Brian spent a lot of time working on what ended up being the instrumental parts of the song. But the part that has lyrics really was one of those things that just kind of came out as a whole. While writing the song together, the two butted heads on one aspect of the song." Asher explains, saying, "We had lengthy conversations during the writing of God Only Knows, because unless you were Kate Smith and you were singing God Bless America, no one thought you could say God in a song. No one had done it, and Brian didn't want to be the first person to try it. He said, 'We'll never get any airplay.' While the song was banned on a few southern radio stations under the claim it was blasphemous, the song performed incredibly well and was a huge success." Dennis Wilson knew this idiot, the infamous criminal and cult leader. Wilson had picked up 2 girls hitchhiking on 2 separate occasions, and they happened to be part of this idiot's family, the name of this idiot's cult. The girl told Wilson about their guru, named This Idiot. One night, after returning from a day at the recording studio, Wilson was met by the idiot and members of his idiotic cult in his own home. Wilson became fascinated by the idiot, and the two became friends. Members of the idiot's cult, mostly women, worked as servants, stayed at Wilson's home over the next few months, costing him thousands of dollars. The money was spent on food, clothes, cars, but most of all, penicillin shots for gonorrhea. In a 1968 interview, Wilson explains the time spent with the idiot, saying, "When I met this idiot, I found he had great musical ideas. We're writing together now. He's dumb in some ways, but I accept his approach and have learned from him." Wilson even recorded one of the Idiot's songs with the Beach Boys, originally called Cease to Exist, changed to Never Learn Not to Love by the band, but the songwriting credits were given entirely to Wilson. Wilson began to grow fearful of the cult and moved out of his house, while the Idiot family would continue to live there until they were eventually evicted. The head idiot could not get in contact with Wilson and left a bullet with his housekeeper as a threat. Terry Melcher, a friend of Wilson and music producer, said that Wilson knew the Idiot family was killing people, but was too afraid to report it to the authorities. Months later, in August 1969, the tragic Tate LaBianca murders occurred. Getting the cover shot for their 1966 hit album Pet Sounds wasn't an easy task. The Beach Boys shot the cover at the San Diego Zoo with photographer George German. The 5 bandmates, minus new member Bruce Johnston, who couldn't appear on the cover but was present, are pictured feeding goats in a seemingly endearing moment. However, the zoo staff reported that the boys mistreated the animals, especially Dennis Wilson, but the band had a different story. Al Jardine recalls the shoot, saying, "You know the big white goat on the front? The most obnoxious animal I've ever known in my life. Pushed me and all of us all over the place. If you had a little piece of something in your hand, he'd know it. And he'd almost trample you trying to get that thing." Bruce Johnson also expressed frustrations with the goats, saying, "The goats were horrible. They jumped all over you and bite. One of them ate my radio. The zoo said we were torturing the animals, but they should have seen what we had to go through. We were doing all the suffering." Quite a funny background story for this beloved album. Well, that's all for today, everyone. I hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.